A toothbrush told me my wife was cheating. Not just any toothbrush, mind you. An electric one with a dead battery that sat in the guest bathroom we never used, sitting upright in the charger like it belonged. I had never seen it before, and unless dental hygiene had become contagious, I was pretty damn sure it wasn't mine. My first thought wasn't rage or even panic. It was, so the bastard brings a travel brush but uses my towels? That was the moment everything began to crack, not with a bang, but with the faint mechanical whirring of a brush that didn't belong to either of us. The day had started normally enough, if you consider dragging yourself through a dying marriage normal. She had left earlier than usual, citing a last-minute meeting downtown, which was odd in itself because she works remotely and hates driving in traffic. Her coffee cup, the one with the #GirlBoss sticker I've always found obnoxious, was sitting untouched on the counter, still warm. She never forgets her coffee. She treats it like a blood transfusion. I remember standing there, staring at the cup, wondering what could have possibly made her so rushed that she'd leave her caffeine lifeline behind. I didn't check her phone or her emails. I didn't need to. I'm an engineer by trade. Pattern recognition is my entire life. And something about this morning didn't fit the pattern. The toothbrush confirmed it. It wasn't the presence of the brush that did it, really. It was the cheap aftershave smell lingering in the room, clinging to the humidity like guilt. That scent had no place in my home, just like the man who brought it here. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I didn't call her in a rage or even send a passive-aggressive text. I stood in the hallway, toothbrush in one hand, coffee cup in the other, feeling like a goddamn detective in a sitcom no one laughs at. She came home later that evening with a smile so practiced, it was almost admirable. Said her meeting ran long, and that she was exhausted. I nodded, playing dumb, and told her I'd picked up dinner. "That's sweet," she said, kissing me on the cheek, her lips soft but detached. I wondered if he tasted that same indifference. We ate pad thai and watched a reality show about couples fixing up a house together, which I found deeply ironic. She laughed at the screen. I laughed at her. Not out loud, just the bitter chuckle of a man who knew he was sitting across from a stranger pretending to be his wife. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of anger, but because my brain was already working the problem like a crime scene. I didn't want a confrontation, I wanted confirmation. I wanted to know exactly who she was screwing, how long it had been going on, and what lies she'd fed him to make him stay. It didn't take much. She was lazy about her secrets. People who think they're smarter than everyone else always are. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I checked her laptop. Password. Our anniversary. Cute. A few clicks, a few browser histories, a synced iMessage account, and there it was. "Can't wait to feel you again." From Liam. No last name, no context. But he'd sent photos. One of them, taken from our bedroom window, had my car clearly in the driveway. The timestamp said it was sent during a week I was at that cybersecurity conference in Austin. I wasn't. The event had been canceled last minute. I had told her I was still going because I needed a break. The joke was on me. She turned my break into a buffet. Now that I had a name and a face, I could have just confronted her. Instead, I dug into his life. Liam was 34, a CrossFit junkie, and, here's the kicker, engaged. Her name was Elena, and she looked like the kind of woman who actually meant her wedding vows. I started to feel a strange sense of kinship with her, like two people unknowingly trapped in the same play, reading from scripts we didn't write. So I started building my case. Not for a court, but for them, Liam and Elena. I screenshot everything, exported chat logs, captured timestamps, found photos with our sheets, our mirror, even our dog in the background. She was that careless. Or maybe she thought I was that blind. Either way, I wasn't about to let her think she could play two lives without consequence. Not anymore. I wasn't going to scream at her. I was going to take my time, hand them both the truth like a surgeon presenting a tumor. Clean, clinical, and irreversible. I wanted her lover to look at her the same way I now did, not with anger, but with absolute disgust. I wanted him to choose to leave her the same way I would. Not because I forced him, but because he saw who she really was and couldn't unsee it. She wouldn't get the satisfaction of a fight. She'd just watch her lies collapse around her, piece by piece, until she was the only one left standing in the ruins. Alone, exactly where she belonged. It's strange how silence becomes suspicious when it didn't used to be. In the beginning, her quiet moments were just part of who she was, reserved, thoughtful, measured. But one day that silence started to feel loaded, like a conversation I wasn't allowed to hear. Our life looked perfect from the outside. We had routines, shared Spotify playlists, matching toothbrush holders, everything you'd expect from a couple that had figured it out. I supported her through the job changes, the therapy sessions, the side business she kept saying was going to take off any day now. I believed in her even when she didn't. That was my role, and I was damn good at it. But at some point, she stopped needing that belief. Or maybe she started getting it somewhere else. I couldn't tell exactly when it started, but little things began to shift. Her laughter got louder, but never around me. She started playing music I'd never heard before, moody indie tracks with lyrics about freedom and breaking chains. At first, I thought it was just a new playlist. But it wasn't music. It was a message. She began using words like boundaries and energy vampires in everyday conversation. Once, when I tried to surprise her with dinner, she said, "I just need to be alone with my thoughts tonight." Like my presence was static, disrupting her mental clarity. The distance didn't come all at once. It came like erosion. Tiny pieces chipped away over time. She started taking long walks alone after work, saying she needed to reconnect with herself. I offered to come along once. She looked at me like I'd suggested we file taxes together. "No offense, but this is about me," she said, smiling just enough to soften the sting. That smile. It used to feel like home. Now it felt like a mask with just enough warmth to keep me fooled. Her phone was always face down. Her texts were always just work stuff. She started locking her laptop when she left the room. I noticed the password screen more often than the actual desktop. She said she was journaling again, that she needed a safe space to express things she couldn't say out loud. I told her I was happy she was finding ways to heal. And I meant it. Because I didn't want to believe she was drifting. I wanted to believe she was evolving, and that I just needed to catch up. But then came the purchases. First, a new yoga membership across town, odd, since there was a studio 2 blocks away. Then new clothes. Then a subscription to a perfume brand she used to mock for being overpriced and mainstream. One night, I went to put something in her car and found a pair of sunglasses on the passenger seat. Not hers. Not mine. Men's, with fingerprints on the lenses and a scratch across the bridge. I closed the door and walked away. I didn't ask. I wasn't ready for an answer. That's the thing about betrayal. It's like hearing a window shatter in the distance. You're not sure where the noise came from, but you know something is broken. She started posting less about us online. Her Instagram, once filled with couple shots and tagged date nights, now featured solo photos with cryptic captions about growth and independence. When I clicked on one of her posts from my account, it showed as unavailable. She had made her profile private. For me. When I asked about it, she said it must have been a glitch. She said she'd fix it. She never did. Still, I didn't confront her. I wanted to believe it was stress, hormones, work, anything but what it probably was. Love makes you blind. Trust makes you stupid. And I was both. But even in my stupidity, I started noticing the subtle rehearsals in her voice. Like when she told me she needed more space for creative solitude. Or when she said she wanted to sleep in the guest room for a few nights to see how it affects her REM cycles. I nodded like it made sense. I acted like this was normal. Like couples everywhere were sleeping apart to improve their dreams. I told myself this was just a phase. She was finding herself. I was proud of her for doing the work. But deep down, a part of me knew she was finding something else. Or someone. And that someone was giving her the kind of energy she no longer wanted from me. Her world was opening, and I was being written out of the script, line by line, scene by scene. She still kissed me goodbye. She still said, "I love you." But the words didn't carry weight anymore. They floated in the air like dust, visible, but meaningless. And I kept pretending not to see it. Because if I acknowledged what was really happening, I'd have to admit that the woman I married wasn't coming back. Not because she was gone, but because she was choosing to leave me behind. She left her tablet unlocked on the kitchen counter, something she never did, not in the past year, not since she'd become so protective of her digital space, as she called it. I didn't go looking for anything. I wasn't snooping. I was reaching for the mail, and there it was, lit up, bright as sin. A notification banner had popped up across the top. "Can't stop thinking about last night. You're addictive." No name, just a phone number. But I didn't need a name. The tablet's home screen was open to her messages, and my hand hovered just above it, not trembling, not hesitant, just still. I tapped the banner. The thread was long, intimate, riddled with things she'd never said to me. Things she used to say, sure, but not in years. You're the only thing that makes me feel alive. When I'm with you, I don't have to be anyone else. He's a good guy, but he'll never understand me the way you do. That one. That was the one that cracked something open in my chest like a crowbar to concrete. She wasn't just unfaithful, she had rewritten me in her story. I was no longer her partner, her friend, her home. I was a narrative device to make her affair more romantic. I was the safe, boring guy she was growing beyond, the supporting character in her personal rebirth saga. Every message after that one blurred into a monotone hum in my brain, photos, plans, nicknames, a date set for a weekend business trip that didn't exist. I closed the thread and turned off the screen. I stood in the kitchen with the tablet in my hand, and I realized I was no longer living with my wife. I was living with a stranger who had learned to mimic her smile, her voice, her habits, like some parasitic copy wearing her skin. My pulse didn't quicken. My breathing didn't change. There was no cinematic gasp, no slow sink to the floor, no whispered, why? I simply set the tablet down, straightened the stack of mail I'd come for, and walked upstairs. I passed her on the stairs. She was coming down with a towel around her hair, fresh out of the shower. She smelled like the perfume she'd started wearing just for herself. She smiled, said something about needing to pick up groceries later. I nodded, said cool. That was all. No sign that I had just read the entire transcript of her second life. No clue that the floor beneath her had just started to give way. Because something in me had gone cold. Not dead cold. Still, sharp, calculating. The way ice cuts, not burns. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw the tablet across the room or scream about betrayal. I walked into our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands folded in my lap. And I just thought about the toothbrush in the guest bathroom, the sin in the hallway, the secret playlist, the sunglasses in her car, the locked phone, the distant smiles, the Instagram filters hiding more than her pores. It wasn't just an affair, it was a transformation. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had discarded me, replaced me with a fantasy version of herself and a man who didn't have to carry the weight of who she used to be. A man she could lie to with fresh eyes, untainted by her history. She was building a new life, and I was being bulldozed beneath its foundation. But I wasn't going to be debris. No, not me. That's when the switch flipped, not rage, not despair. Just resolve. I would become invisible, observant, surgical. I wouldn't lash out. I'd let her keep thinking she was smart, that I was clueless, that the illusion still held. Because while she smiled in the mirror at her personal evolution, I would be planning something irreversible. Not just revenge. Revelation. I would make sure he saw her the way I now did. Not as some radiant goddess of growth, but as a manipulator who couldn't even keep her lies straight. He would walk away, not out of shame, but out of revulsion. She would be left holding the ashes of the fantasy she tried to build on top of my bones. And I would walk out of it untouched. Because in that moment, sitting on our bed with the knowledge of every kiss, every text, every lie, I realized I didn't need to win her back. I needed to make sure no one would want what she had become. And I wouldn't have to scream to do it. I would just have to show him who she really was. She still thought I was blind. That was the most insulting part. How completely convinced she was that I couldn't see her slipping through the cracks she created. But blindness is only a problem if you're not listening. I stopped looking for truth in her words and started hunting it in the spaces between them. The pauses, the hesitations, the moments where her eyes darted to the corner before she answered. I became quiet, surgical. The husband she thought she'd left behind emotionally was still right there, sitting across from her at dinner, listening with dead eyes and a calculating mind. I didn't accuse. I asked things like, "Did you finish up at the studio today?" Even though I'd already called the place that morning and confirmed she hadn't been there all week. I watched her lie. Watched the little twitch in her temple as she built her alibi. She thought I was checking in. I was collecting data. I logged every fake schedule update into a spreadsheet. I noted timestamps, mileage on her car, even checked the placement of her shoes by the door. One day, she left in sneakers and came back in flats. I asked nothing. Just wrote it down. I began matching her storylines to locations by syncing our home Wi-Fi logs with her phone's MAC address. She didn't know I had access to the router's admin panel. She'd say she spent the afternoon in her office. Funny, because her phone never connected to our network once that day. That meant she wasn't even near the house. I traced her trail like a predator following scent. Not through brute force, but through omission. Gaps. Things she forgot she told me, or didn't realize she was revealing. I took out a small amount of cash one morning and left it in an envelope on her desk, marked studio rental. She never asked about it, never mentioned it. A few days later, I saw a Venmo transaction to someone named Kai Flexed Biceps for coffee and sweat. I screenshotted it. Looked up Kai's name through her old tagged photos. Personal trainer. Not hers. Not from our area. Different city altogether. She wasn't working out. She was working around me. I set a trap the next week. Told her I was being sent out of town for a conference. Same script she used on me. I even packed a bag and left the house early. Drove 4 blocks, parked, and waited. She didn't leave immediately. She waited until late afternoon. A new outfit. Hair done. Left the house at 5:17 p.m. I followed from a distance. Not directly. That would have been emotional. I followed her Uber driver. I had installed a small AirTag in the lining of her purse 2 days earlier when she left it in the kitchen. She was headed to a boutique hotel in the city. Not a sleazy motel, no, she had class. I checked her story later that night. She said she stayed home watching a documentary about trauma bonding. I nodded and told her it sounded enlightening. Inside, I was memorizing every word, every twitch, every tiny micro-expression she didn't know she had. Her favorite cafe became another trap. I called ahead and paid a barista to hold a gift card for Rachel with a note inside that read, "Thanks for last night. I can still smell you on my sheets." I left the barista my number and asked to be alerted when she picked it up. 2 days later, I got a text, "Your friend just claimed the envelope." She smiled when she read it. I asked nothing when she came home that evening. Just kissed her cheek and said she smelled nice. She laughed. I didn't. I also began tracking her best friend, Ashley. Not physically. I followed her digital trail. Ashley was terrible at privacy. Her Instagram stories were like open confessionals. Tag locations. Boomerangs of cocktails. Quick shots of her and my wife, often in places my wife said she'd never been. That's how I learned about the lake house. A rental outside the city they claimed was a girls' reset weekend. Strange, because in one of the clips Ashley posted and quickly deleted, I saw the reflection of a man in the window behind them. Tall, fit, shirtless. I reverse image searched his tattoos and found his fitness account. Kai. Of course. Everything began to form shape. Not just a fling, a structure. Lies laid over lies, covered with emotional jargon and empowerment rhetoric. I saw how deep it ran. And I said nothing. I kept pretending, playing the role, supporting her newfound independence, encouraging her healing, telling her I was proud of her evolution, all while constructing a dossier that would make the CIA blush. I had texts, screenshots, photos, timestamps, audio from our baby monitor repurposed into a room bug. I had it all. And she had no idea, because she was so caught up in the fantasy of her reinvention that she never noticed the man she'd left behind had become her shadow, her ghost, her reckoning. She was smiling more now, glowing, thinking she was in control. But she wasn't climbing out of her old life. She was digging her own grave, and I was already picking out the headstone. I invited her to a hotel rooftop bar, one of those sleek places with dim lighting, overpriced cocktails, and a view that made even the lies look prettier from above. She showed up in red, her confidence high, perfume thick in the air like armor, thinking it was a date night I'd planned to reconnect, to make up for being emotionally distant, her newest accusation. She kissed my cheek and said I looked nice. I smiled, told her she looked exactly like herself. We sat at a corner table with full view of the city skyline, and I asked her what she wanted to drink. "Surprise me," she said, like she used to say back when we were real. I waved over the waiter and ordered her favorite, bourbon, 2 cubes, splash of orange, the way she drinks it when she's trying to feel powerful. We made small talk at first. She spoke about a new project she was manifesting, the yoga retreat she was considering, how much she appreciated me being more open lately. I let her talk. I even laughed at the right moments. And when she leaned in close, touching my hand, pretending we still had something real between us, I gave her the look she used to fall for, the soft, steady gaze of a man fully present. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small envelope. I slid it across the table. "What's this?" she asked, a playful smirk already tugging at her lips. "A surprise," I said. She opened it slowly, casually, until the first photo slid into view. Her smile twitched. She blinked. Then she pulled out the next one. And the next. Her face drained in slow motion, like a faucet losing pressure. The photos were clear. Her. Kai. The lake house. A kiss under string lights. Her hand on his chest. One shot taken from behind glass. Her straddling him in the reflection of a window. She froze, lips slightly parted, eyes darting to me, then back to the envelope, like maybe if she blinked hard enough it would vanish. This isn't what it looks like, she said, barely above a whisper. I tilted my head. Then what is it? I asked calmly. She straightened up, fingers tightening around the photos. We were just talking that night. The others are misleading. Out of context. She was already reaching for the script. It didn't mean anything. It just happened. I was confused. I needed clarity. I sipped my drink, let her stammer through justifications she didn't even believe. You weren't really present. You've been so cold. I didn't know if you even loved me anymore. That was the pivot to blame. She thought if she could paint herself as neglected, then everything would somehow even out. I nodded slowly. So you decided to sleep with another man in our bed? To tell him I was just a phase you were growing out of? To take him to the same lake house we talked about buying? She swallowed hard. It was one time. I pulled my phone from my pocket and slid it across the table. A video played. Her voice. Her moans. The creak of our bed. One time, I asked. Her hand flew to her mouth. You recorded me, she hissed, eyes wide. No, I said. You recorded yourself. That's your baby monitor in the background, remember? The one you forgot to turn off. She looked like she'd been slapped. I was in a bad place, she said, switching gears again. You don't understand what it's like to feel invisible. I do now, I said. Every time you smiled at me after being with him, I learned exactly what that felt like. She pushed the photos back toward me. This doesn't have to change everything. We can work through it. You're stronger than this. That's when she leaned back, arms crossed, and said with a hollow laugh, honestly, you were too boring to notice until now. There it was. The mockery, the arrogance, the belief that I was still the man who'd begged to be chosen. I noticed, I said. I just didn't want to believe you were this hollow. Her face cracked then. The silence between us pressed in like a third presence, heavy, suffocating. She looked around, suddenly aware of the other patrons, the staff, the city glowing beneath her, like she'd only just realized this was real. What are you going to do? She asked quietly, a tremor finally creeping into her voice. I picked up my drink, took one last sip, and said, nothing. You've already done enough. I just wanted you to see yourself clearly before he does. Her eyes widened. You told him? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She knew. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Her face, once full of contempt, now twisted into fear. Not fear of me, but fear of being exposed, of being alone, of having her fantasy collapse in front of the very man she used to manipulate her escape. I leaned in slightly, just enough to look her dead in the eye. Enjoy the view, I said. It's the last time you'll see the world from this high. And then I sat back, calm as ever, while she stared at me, panic blooming beneath her carefully painted face, as the tension hung between us like a loaded gun, waiting to fire. She followed me into the elevator like a woman trying to outrun her own collapse, heels clicking too fast, voice trembling with a rage she couldn't quite control, spitting my name like it was a curse. You set me up, she snapped, jabbing a finger into my chest. You've been planning this, manipulating me like some sick game. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. I looked down at her hand like it was a fly that had landed on my sleeve. You should have been honest, I said, voice low, flat. But I guess honesty doesn't photograph well on Instagram. She recoiled, eyes narrowing. You think this is all my fault, she hissed. You think I woke up one day and chose to be this unhappy? You were never there, not really. Always working, always distracted, always average. She wanted to hurt me, wanted to break something inside me so she could feel superior again. I gave her nothing. I watched her unravel with the silence of a man who had already buried the relationship like a body he wasn't planning to visit. You smothered me, she continued, desperate now, voice rising. You controlled everything. My job, my money, my friends, no wonder I needed to breathe. I tilted my head. So you decided to breathe into another man's mouth, I said. That's not freedom. That's cowardice. She slapped the elevator wall, her frustration mounting like a tide that couldn't find the shore. Don't act like some victim. You're not a saint. You were boring. Predictable. You made everything feel like a spreadsheet. Yet you still lived off the numbers, I said. Right until I stopped adding you into the equation. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she'd lost the rhythm of her own defense. "You were never strong," she snapped, reaching for anything now. "A real man wouldn't do this in silence. A real man would fight for me." I gave a small, sharp smile. A real woman wouldn't need to be fought over. That one cut deep. I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of something breaking behind the mascara. "You think this is going to make you feel better?" she asked, voice cracking. "Burning me down like this? What does that get you, huh? Some sixth sense of justice?" I leaned in, just enough for her to feel the chill behind my calm. "I'm not here to feel better," I said. "I'm here to make sure you never forget who you really are." She laughed bitterly, but it came out wrong, half cough, half choke. "You'll regret this. You will. One day you'll wake up and realize you let go of the only person who ever actually lied to me. Gaslit me. F*** get someone else in our bed." My voice stayed calm, almost clinical, like I was reciting a diagnosis. "If that's what love looks like to you, then I'm glad to be cured." She stepped back, suddenly quiet, I scanning my face for something familiar, some sign that the old dynamic still existed, that I could be pulled back in with enough tears or noise. But there was nothing left. She wasn't speaking to her husband anymore. She was speaking to a mirror, and the reflection no longer played along. "You're just doing this to feel powerful," she muttered. "You always needed control. Even now. It's pathetic." I shrugged. "No, what's pathetic is begging for control over a man you already betrayed." She clenched her fists, chest heaving, trying to summon one last weapon, one final blow to make me bleed like I used to. "I made a mistake," she said, eyes wide now, voice cracking just enough to sound human. "But we can fix this. We can—" "No," I interrupted, cold and final. "You can remember this." The elevator doors opened, and she froze as if unsure whether to follow me or fall to the floor. I stepped out into the hallway without looking back. Her voice followed me, smaller now, desperate. "You don't mean this. You can't just walk away." But she was wrong. I wasn't walking away. I had already left the moment I read those messages. Everything after that had just been a funeral, hers. And now, as I walked down the hallway of that rooftop hotel, I realized the only thing more powerful than shouting was indifference. She had built her power from deception, manipulation, and control. And I had shattered all three with silence, evidence, and calm. She was behind me now, shaking, trying to salvage dignity from the wreckage she caused. But I didn't care. And that scared her more than anything else ever could. The beauty of a good revenge plan is that it doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be timed. Every move I made was quiet, methodical, and deliberate, like tightening a noose she didn't even know was around her neck. The night after the rooftop confrontation, while she locked herself in the bedroom and made frantic phone calls to God knows who, I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a yellow legal pad, mapping out the blueprint of her downfall. Not out of anger, not to scream, "I told you so," but to make sure she understood the price of turning a man who once loved her into a ghost with a plan. First step, the evidence. I had already collected everything: screenshots, voice notes, timestamped photos, location histories, call logs, deleted messages recovered from her synced cloud backups, financial transfers she tried to hide through cash apps under fake notes like lunch and art supplies. I sorted them into folders, digital and physical, backed them up on 3 separate encrypted drives, and printed 2 hard copies. One went into a locked safe deposit box under my name only. The other, I couriered to a private mailing address I had reserved months ago when the first cracks appeared. That was for insurance, just in case she tried to flip the narrative later. Then came the finances. She always assumed the accounts were ours, but only 2 were truly joint. I quietly removed her access, transferred my salary into a new private account she couldn't touch, and cut the line of credit she'd been living off while playing the struggling entrepreneur. The car she drove? Leased under my name. I scheduled a retrieval. The card she used for daily spending? Gone. Phone plan? Transferred out. The utilities? Every account re-registered under my name. Then canceled. She'd have no water, no gas, no internet by next week. I didn't tell her. I let the countdown tick in silence. Step 3. Reputation. I compiled a short, emotionless email, simple, factual, bullet-pointed. No commentary. Just dates, times, and photographic proof. I sent it to her parents, her sister, and the 2 closest friends she hadn't already lied to about our marriage. The subject line was, "I thought you deserved to know." I didn't ask for sides. I didn't request support. I just exposed the rot she worked so hard to keep hidden. Then came her job. She had told her boss she was taking mental health days, that she was burned out from carrying the household alone. What she didn't know was that during one of those supposed burnout days, I followed her to a wine bar in another city where she met Kai for lunch, and, judging by the parking lot display, a little more. I snapped photos, recorded the time, date, and location. She worked in public relations. Optics were everything. I contacted her HR department, not as a bitter husband, but as a concerned spouse with proof she was misrepresenting the company while on personal leave. I attached the images. I never heard back, but I did see her mood shift 2 days later when she started checking her phone like she was expecting a storm. That was the fourth move, psychological pressure. She didn't know what was coming, but she felt it. I was always kind before. Now, I was still. That scared her more. I started leaving earlier in the mornings, returning later, never saying where I'd been. When she asked, I'd say things like, tying up loose ends, or just preparing. I watched her eyes search my face for clues and find nothing. She began to unravel in small ways. She'd open drawers and find my things gone. Look in the closet and notice the hangers lighter. One day she asked if I was moving out. I said, not yet, and walked past her. I had already signed the lease on a new place. The paperwork was filed. Divorce proceedings were quietly underway, with every financial disclosure loaded and waiting. No lawyers yet. Just precision. Just preparation. I even began the process of reclaiming our dog, technically registered in my name. I sent a polite, formal email to the vet clinic, transferring all records to my new address. She found out a week later when they called to confirm the change. Why are you doing this? She asked one night, tears brimming. Because you taught me how, I said. Then I walked away. I told her nothing about the email I sent to Kai, complete with every lie she told about him to other men. I let the silence do the work. I didn't need to scream, didn't need to expose her in front of a crowd. I let her feel the world shrink around her, day by day. I made her watch her illusions collapse one by one until she couldn't tell which lie was unraveling first. Every thread I pulled had been one she stitched herself. I didn't have to destroy her. I just had to stop protecting her. She still thought she had time. Still thought I might cool off. But while she stood there grasping at the ashes, I was already gone, metaphorically first, legally soon after. And when the final paper arrived, served by mail with the evidence attached and my signature below, she'd finally understand. I was never the one who lost control. I was the one who waited. It happened at her sister's engagement party, a flawless evening set in the garden of a rented estate, lights draped across trees, soft jazz curling through the air, laughter floating like perfume above a crowd of people who still believed in her. She wore white, of course, like she always did when she wanted to be the center of a story that didn't belong to her. She clung to me that evening more than usual, held my arm with just enough pressure to appear devoted, but not so tight that people would ask questions. I let her. I smiled. I played the part. Because tonight wasn't mine to perform. It was hers. Her final act. I had sent the emails 2 hours before the party began, one to her parents, another to her sister, a third to her closest friends. Each contained the same compressed folder. Photos, videos, screenshots, time logs, messages, and one recorded phone call between her and Kai where she mocked everyone in her life, calling them blind, simple, forgettable. I don't love any of them, she had said, laughing. They're just easier to manage when they think I care. The party was a slow burn, chatter, champagne, fake toasts, and family smiles. And then, like dominoes falling in an unseen sequence, the change began. Her mother turned first, eyes sharp, mouth pulled into a thin line. Then her sister, glass in hand, frozen halfway to her lips as her phone screen lit up with the truth. Her father didn't say a word. He just stood up and walked away, silent, jaw clenched, hands shaking. Her friends started whispering, glancing at her like she'd suddenly become something too toxic to touch. The air shifted, a breeze that felt like judgment. She noticed it too. At first, she laughed, a nervous chuckle as she leaned into me and asked, "Why is everyone acting so weird?" I said nothing. I watched. She tried to recover, made a toast that no one acknowledged, cracked a joke no one laughed at. Then Kai arrived. I hadn't invited him. I hadn't needed to. Someone else must have forwarded him the folder. He stood at the edge of the garden like a shadow, watching her. She saw him, froze, smiled weakly, then watched him turn around and leave without a word. Her face cracked in real time. I saw her mouth twitch, her hand shake. She glanced around for someone to catch her, to believe her, to pretend for her. No one did. The whispers turned into silence. Not outrage, just distance. Cold, cavernous distance. Her sister's fiancé wouldn't look at her. Her best friend crossed the lawn and stood next to me. When she spoke, it was brittle. "What the hell did you do?" she asked, voice low, shaking with fury and fear. "I just told the truth," I said. "The rest, you earned." She tried to laugh it off, said things like, "This is so overblown. None of that means anything. You're all being dramatic." But her voice had no gravity. She was spiraling, and everyone saw it. The woman who had once dominated every room with charm and control was now flailing in full view of the people who had once adored her. She tried to pull me aside. I didn't move. She tried to raise her voice. No one responded. She said my name 3 times, like repetition would rebuild a bridge already turned to ash. "We can still fix this," she whispered, eyes darting, panic barely masked by a trembling smile. "We can explain, make it look like a misunderstanding. Say you faked it. I don't care. Just say something." I did. I leaned in slowly, meeting her eyes, and said, "They don't see the woman you pretend to be anymore. They see you." That was the moment her shoulders dropped, her mask fully collapsed, and her legs buckled just slightly. Not enough to fall, but enough that the entire room felt her weight shift. Her mother turned her back. Her father didn't return. Her sister stood with arms crossed, pain and disgust written across her face like a verdict. The perfect party she'd orchestrated as another stage for her ego had become the scene of her unmasking. And I just stood there, silent, calm, watching, not angry, not gloating, just still. She met my eyes, and for the first time since this entire thing began, I saw fear. Not the kind that comes from getting caught, but the kind that comes from finally realizing the game is over, and no one's playing anymore. She wasn't the clever one. She wasn't the manipulator. She was just another liar out of moves. She whispered one last time, "Please," like that single word could undo 100 betrayals. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence had already said everything she refused to hear. She was left standing in the center of a party that no longer had a place for her, surrounded by people who finally knew the truth, stripped of the image she'd spent years curating, broken not by my hand, but by her own reflection staring back at her in every pair of disappointed eyes. It happened 2 days after the party, at her mother's house. A follow-up brunch turned battlefield. I hadn't planned to go, but her sister insisted, said it was only right after everything that had come out. I knew the real reason. They wanted witnesses. The living room was full. Her parents, her sister, her best friend, even a couple of extended relatives pretending to sip coffee while waiting for the next explosion. I walked in calm, hands in my pockets. She was already there, back straight, smile stitched together with desperation, acting like the world hadn't just cracked open beneath her. The moment our eyes met, the smile faded. "You're really going to do this here?" she hissed as I approached. "You've already turned everyone against me." I looked around the room. No one jumped to her defense. "Not this time." "I didn't turn them," I said. "You just finally gave them a reason to stop pretending." She stood, arms flailing, trying to reclaim control. "Oh, come on. So I made a mistake? One mistake, and suddenly I'm a monster?" Her mother flinched at the word mistake. Her father clenched his jaw. I stepped closer. It wasn't one. It was months. Lies stacked like bricks while you smiled in my face and mocked me behind my back. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice." "You weren't there," she shouted, voice cracking, eyes wild. "You were always busy, always logical, cold, robotic. I felt alone in our marriage. So your solution was to unzip yourself into another man's arms?" I snapped, and the room gasped. "You didn't want help. You wanted an excuse. You wanted a hero in public and a secret in private. And now that it's all out, you're begging for sympathy from the very people you manipulated. You have no idea how hard it was," she screamed. "Living with someone who never needed anything, who never broke down, never showed weakness, just stared through me like I wasn't even real. Because I thought I was building a life with a partner," I said. "Not raising a narcissist with a Wi-Fi password." Someone behind me coughed to hide a laugh. Her cheeks flushed, rage and humiliation crashing together in her eyes. "You think you're perfect," she spat. "You think this makes you the victim? You're not the victim. You're just the fool who couldn't keep me interested." Her sister stood then. "Enough," she muttered, but I held up a hand. "No. Let her finish. Let her keep digging." I turned back to my wife. "Go ahead. Tell them all how boring I was, how little I meant to you, how the man who paid the bills, kept the lights on, and covered your lies wasn't man enough to keep you satisfied. She stepped toward me, finger in my face. I needed passion. I needed to feel alive. You made me feel like a prisoner. No, I said, you made yourself a prisoner to your own ego. And when the walls started closing in, you lit a match and blamed me for the fire. Her mother started crying quietly. Her father stood up and walked out of the room. I didn't stop. You say I smothered you. But I see it now. You never wanted a partner. You wanted a fan club. And when I stopped clapping, you found someone else to cheer for your performance. She turned to the room, frantic now. You're all just going to let him talk to me like this? After everything I've been through? Her best friend folded her arms. Everything you did, you mean? One of her cousins pulled out a phone, recording. She noticed and shouted, Are you filming this? Are you serious? I stepped forward, final blow forming in my chest like steel. You walked into this house thinking you could out-talk the truth. That if you cried loud enough, blamed hard enough, lied big enough, everyone would forget what you did. But they didn't. And I didn't. You are not misunderstood. You are not broken. You are not healing. You are exposed. And for the first time in your life, no one is clapping for the show. She stood there trembling, mascara smudged, chest heaving, eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. The room was silent, just the sound of shallow breathing and the click of that phone recording every second. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just turned, slowly, deliberately, and walked to the door. Her voice chased me one last time. You're going to regret this. I paused at the doorway, looked back at the shattered thing in the middle of the room that used to be my wife, and said, No, I regret trusting you with a heart you only wanted to wear, not carry. Then I walked out. And this time, no one followed her. 6 months later, she lived in a one-bedroom apartment over a dry cleaner's shop on the edge of a town no one brags about visiting, where the streets are too quiet for her kind of noise, and the people don't care enough to ask what she used to be. Her once vibrant Instagram, once a gallery of curated lies and smug smiles, now sat dormant, no posts, no comments, only the echo of a past life people now scrolled past in silence. Her followers unfollowed. Her friends didn't just go silent, they vanished. Blocked. Muted. Gone. The wedding ring she used to flaunt was long gone, sold maybe, or stuffed in some drawer beside her regrets. Her job, once built on appearances and charm, disappeared after HR received too many questions about her character, after clients started whispering and screenshots started circulating. The company couldn't afford to keep a scandal attached to a smiling face. Her parents stopped calling. Her sister blocked her number. Her father never spoke her name again. And Kai? He ghosted the moment the first DM leaked to his fiancée. Vanished without a goodbye, without a fight, without a trace. She never even saw him leave. He just stopped answering. She had no one left. And that's when the calls started. First, late at night, voicemails filled with silence, or a single word, please. Then came the texts. Apologies written in paragraphs she used to be too proud to write. I miss us. You didn't deserve that. I can't breathe without you. The one that made me laugh, actually laugh, was, I still love you. I didn't reply to that one. Didn't need to. She showed up at my door 3 weeks ago, hair tangled, mascara like war paint from the crying she thought would move me. She knocked once, then again, then whispered my name like it meant something. I opened the door just enough to look her in the eye. I'm sorry, she said, voice cracking, hands trembling, the cold eating into her through a jacket that didn't look warm enough for the storm she was standing in. I lost everything. You were right. About all of it. I stared at her, quiet, steady. She searched my face for something: sympathy, pain, hope. Anything. Can we talk? She begged. Not about getting back together. I just need to know who I am without you. I studied her face, once familiar, now foreign, like a photograph left out in the rain. Warped, faded, damaged beyond recognition. You're whoever you decided to be the moment you lied to my face, I said. And I already mourned her. She's not buried here anymore. Her lip quivered. She tried to speak. I closed the door before she could. No rage. No speech. Just finality. The kind of silence that doesn't beg to be broken. That night, she sent one more text. You're the only person who ever really saw me. I stared at it for a minute, then typed back. No. I saw who you pretended to be. Then I blocked her. She no longer existed in my world. And maybe the worst part for her is that I didn't walk away angry. I walked away clean. She's the one left standing in the ruins, screaming into a wind that stopped listening. That's the price of betrayal, not just losing someone's love, but losing their memory of you as anything worth loving. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been a long one, I know, but sometimes the slow burn leaves the deepest scars. Where are you listening from? And tell me, did you enjoy the fall?